I try to avoid that, but I think it's unavoidable.
You know, I can't do this forever. I've been doing it since I was 21. As you move into your 80s, you say, hey, that's enough.
On September 16th, 2025, headlines flashed across the world. Robert Redford dead at 89. The golden boy of American cinema, the Sundance Kid himself, had passed away peacefully in his sleep at his home in Sundance, Utah. His longtime publicist confirmed the news, saying Redford left this world surrounded by those he loved, in the mountains he had called home for decades. There was no mention of illness, no drawn-out struggle, just a quiet ending to a life that had shaped generations. The shock was instant. Within hours, the New York Times, People, and every major outlet carried the story. Fans flooded social media with tributes, the hashtag #ThankYouBob trending worldwide. Movie clips from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Sting, and All the President's Men filled his timelines, as if people were clinging to fragments of his greatness. Hollywood itself seemed to pause. Jane Fonda admitted through tears that she could not stop crying. Meryl Streep called him one of the lions. Directors and actors, young and old, echoed the same sentiment. A giant had fallen. But Robert Redford was not just an actor. He was a storyteller, a director, an activist, and the man who changed independent cinema forever with the Sundance Film Festival. His passing marked the end of an era and the beginning of countless tributes. Tonight, we look beyond the headlines. We uncover the rise of a golden boy, the hidden tragedies, the controversies, and the legacy of a man who shaped both Hollywood and the world. Because Robert Redford's story did not end with his death. In many ways, it has only just begun. Rise of a Golden Boy. Before he became Hollywood's golden boy, Robert Redford was just a kid from Santa Monica, California. Born on August 18, 1936, to a modest family, his early life was far from the glamour that would later surround him. His father worked as a milkman, his mother kept the household together, and young Robert found comfort in drawing and painting. In fact, before the world knew him as an actor, Redford dreamed of becoming an artist. That dream carried him overseas. After dropping out of the University of Colorado, he traveled to Europe, living a bohemian life in Paris and Florence, sketching, painting, and learning about culture. But when he returned to the United States, something shifted. He enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City, and slowly the painter became a performer. By the early 1960s, Redford was climbing the ladder of Broadway theater. His big break came in Neil Simon's comedy, Pied for une Moise, Barefoot in the Park, where his natural charm and effortless humor made him stand out. Audiences adored him. Hollywood noticed. In 1967, he reprised that role in the film version opposite Jane Fonda. It was a turning point. Suddenly, Robert Redford was no longer just a stage actor. He was a leading man. But the real explosion came 2 years later. In 1969, Redford starred alongside Paul Newman in Meek, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid. The film was a phenomenon. Redford's role as the charming outlaw Sundance Kid made him an instant superstar. The chemistry between Redford and Newman was electric, the kind that defined a generation of cinema. Posters of the film hung in college dorms across America. Women swooned, men wanted to be him, and Hollywood had found its new golden face. What followed was a decade of dominance. Redford wasn't just popular, he was everywhere. He delivered hit after hit. The Candidate, 1972, where he played a reluctant politician swept into power. The Way We Were, 1973. Opposite Barbra Streisand, a romantic drama that became a cultural touchstone. The Sting, 1973. Reuniting him with Paul Newman, a film so iconic it won the Oscar for Best Picture. And in All the President's Men, 1976. He became Bob Woodward, the reporter who helped uncover the Watergate scandal. By the late 1970s, Robert Redford was more than a movie star. He was the #1 box office draw in America, With his blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and rugged yet boyish charisma, he embodied the idea of the perfect leading man. Magazines called him the most handsome actor of his generation. But there was more to him than looks. He had a quiet intensity, a seriousness that made his performances feel authentic, even when the films were pure Hollywood spectacle. Still, the fame was overwhelming. Redford often confessed that being idolized for his looks was frustrating. "People have been so busy relating to how I look," he once said. "It's a miracle I didn't become a self-conscious blob of protoplasm." Behind the glamour, he longed to be recognized for his craft, and for something deeper than his appearance. But in the 1970s, the golden boy could not escape the spotlight. He was on magazine covers, topping polls as the most popular actor in the world. His films weren't just movies, they were cultural events. And while he enjoyed the success, he was already searching for something more. The boy who once dreamed of painting was beginning to dream again. This time, the dream wasn't about standing in front of the camera. It was about stepping behind it and changing Hollywood forever. From actor to director, the Oscar. Triumph. By the end of the 1970s, Robert Redford had everything a Hollywood star could dream of: fame, money, and a string of box office hits. But deep inside, he felt restless. The applause for his looks and charm never satisfied the artist within him. He wanted control over stories, the chance to shape films not just with his face, but with his vision. And so he stepped behind the camera. In 1980, Redford made his directorial debut with Ordinary People. It was not a flashy blockbuster. There were no cowboys, no con men, no high-speed chases. Instead, it was an intimate drama about grief, guilt, and the fragile bonds of family. The story followed an upper-middle-class household shattered by the accidental death of one son and the attempted suicide of another. On paper, it was risky, a heavy subject for a star known for his rugged charisma. But Redford trusted the material and poured his heart into every frame. The result stunned Hollywood. Ordinary People swept the Academy Awards, winning Best Picture, Best Director for Redford, Best Supporting Actor for Timothy Hutton, and Best Adapted Screenplay. The golden boy of the screen had become a golden director. The win silenced critics who had dismissed him as just a pretty face. Overnight, Redford was recognized as a serious filmmaker, capable of depth and artistry. But he did not stop there. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Redford directed films that blended beauty with substance. The Milagro Beanfield War, 1988, explored social justice in a small New Mexico town. A River Runs Through It, 1992, captured the haunting beauty of Montana and launched the career of a young Brad Pitt. Quiz Show, 1994, his sharp exploration of a game show scandal earned him another Academy Award nomination for Best Director. And The Horse Whisperer, 1998, which he also starred in, became a sweeping romantic drama that showcased his ability to handle both performance and direction with grace. Audiences saw a new side of Redford, the storyteller. He was not chasing the spotlight anymore. Instead, he was building legacies through his films. Critics praised his directing style: subtle, restrained, focused on characters and emotions rather than flashy tricks. In an era when Hollywood was dominated by special effects and spectacle, Redford reminded audiences of the power of simple human storytelling. The Academy continued to honor him. In 2002, he received an honorary Oscar for his contributions to film, with the Academy declaring that he was an inspiration to independent and innovative filmmakers everywhere. It was not just about his movies. It was about the way he had used his fame to nurture new talent and new voices. Redford himself once admitted that directing gave him a freedom he never felt as an actor. Behind the camera, he was no longer limited to a character or a role. He could create entire worlds, set the tone, and tell the stories he believed mattered. For a man who had long felt trapped by his public image, it was liberation. Yet even as his directing career flourished, Redford's ambitions stretched further. He wanted to change not just the stories on screen, but the entire system that made them possible. That dream would give birth to something that redefined American cinema, a revolution known as Sundance. The birth of Sundance and the indie film revolution. Robert Redford had conquered Hollywood as both actor and director, but he was not content with personal success. He wanted to give others the chance to tell their stories, especially those who were often ignored by big studios. This desire would lead him to create something far bigger than himself. The Sundance Institute, and eventually the Sundance Film Festival. It all began in the early 1980s. Redford had long retreated to his beloved ranch in the mountains of Utah, a property he purchased in the 1960s. The wilderness gave him peace, but it also gave him perspective. He looked around Hollywood and saw a system dominated by blockbusters, sequels, and safe studio projects. There was little space for fresh voices, new filmmakers, or daring ideas. Redford believed the industry needed a counterbalance. In 1981, he officially founded the Sundance Institute, named after his most famous role. Its mission was simple but revolutionary: to provide workshops, labs, and funding for emerging filmmakers to develop their craft. Directors, screenwriters, and actors who might never have broken through the studio walls suddenly had a home where their voices mattered. From those early workshops grew the Sundance Film Festival. At first, it was a modest gathering in Utah. Small screenings, experimental films, and raw energy. But under Redford's guidance, Sundance quickly evolved into the heartbeat of independent cinema. By the 1990s, it was the launchpad for some of the biggest names in film: Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith, Steven Soderbergh, and later Ava DuVernay, Ryan Coogler, and Damien Chazelle. Redford never saw Sundance as just another festival. For him, it was a cultural movement. He described it as giving filmmakers a chance to fail safely, so they could take risks and push boundaries. Those risks paid off. Films like Nina White's Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Clerks, and Reservoir Dogs exploded out of Sundance and changed the landscape of cinema. Suddenly, independent film was not a fringe interest. It was cool, it was powerful, it was profitable. The media began calling Redford the godfather of indie film, and rightly so. Without him, many groundbreaking directors might have remained unknown, their scripts buried in drawers. Instead, they found an audience because Redford gave them a platform. Sundance also became a space for diversity long before it was fashionable in Hollywood. Redford insisted on spotlighting stories from underrepresented voices: women, minorities, and international filmmakers. This commitment made Sundance not just a festival, but a symbol of artistic freedom. Of course, success brought criticism. As Sundance grew, some argued it became too commercial, a marketplace for studios hunting the next hit rather than a sanctuary for pure artistry. Redford acknowledged these tensions but defended the festival's mission. For him, Sundance was never about perfection. It was about giving people a chance. Independent film is the lifeblood of cinema, he often said, and he fought fiercely to protect it. By the 2000s, Sundance was the premier independent film festival in America, influencing not just Hollywood but the global industry. The tiny mountain town of Park City, Utah, became a yearly pilgrimage site for celebrities, critics, and aspiring filmmakers. And at the center of it all was Robert Redford, not as a superstar seeking the spotlight, but as a quiet mentor, a guide, and a gatekeeper for the future of film. When Redford died in 2025, the Sundance Institute released a moving tribute. Robert Redford, our ultimate champion of independent film, launched a movement that inspired generations of artists. His spirit will forever guide us. From an outlaw on screen to a guardian of creativity off it, Redford's legacy was no longer just about the roles he played. It was about the doors he opened. the activist, and the fighter. Robert Redford was more than a movie star and more than a director. He was a fighter, a man who used his fame as a weapon not for ego, but for causes he believed in. Long before celebrity activism became a trend, Redford was already on the front lines, raising his voice for the planet, for justice, and for freedom of expression. His journey as an activist began in the R1970s, when Hollywood's golden boy shocked the industry by stepping away from glamour to campaign against environmental destruction. In 1975, he publicly opposed a massive coal-fired power plant project in Utah, his adopted home. Redford went so far as to take the fight to CBS's 60 Minutes, exposing the dangers the plant would bring to the landscape he loved. Against the odds, his campaign helped halt the project. It was proof that a star could use his platform for something bigger than box office success. From then on, Redford never stopped. He became a lifelong board member of the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, lending his face, his money, and his voice to environmental causes. He fought against drilling in national parks, supported clean energy, and raised awareness about climate change long before it became a global crisis. Redford once said, "I realized when I first learned about climate change that when there's something you have to do, you better act, and act quickly." Those words became his philosophy. In 2005, alongside his son James, he co-founded the Redford Center, a nonprofit dedicated to funding films and projects focused on environmental solutions. Through documentaries and campaigns, he inspired generations to see nature not as a backdrop, but as something sacred. But his activism was not limited to the environment. Redford also became a political voice. A self-described progressive, he was unafraid to criticize policies he believed were damaging. He spoke out about campaign finance reform, civil liberties, and freedom of the press. He wrote passionate op-eds about the growing division in America, lamenting what he called the divided states of America. Perhaps his most outspoken moments came during the presidency of Donald Trump. Redford openly criticized the administration's environmental rollbacks and divisive politics. In one essay, he argued that Trump should acquit for our benefit, declaring, "Politics is in a very dark place right now." Critics on the right called him just another Hollywood liberal, but supporters praised his courage. For Redford, it was never about party loyalty. It was about principles, about fighting for the land, the people, and the values he cherished. His activism earned him a recognition far beyond Hollywood. He received the NASBOAS National Medal of Arts in 1996, the Kaki Audubon Medal in 1989, for environmental leadership, and in 2016, President Barack Obama awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. The image of Redford standing at the White House, medal around his neck, was a reminder that his legacy was not only cinematic, it was civic. Still, Redford never pretended to be perfect. He admitted he had not always been politically active in his youth, and that his awareness grew with time. But once awakened, he became relentless. Unlike many celebrities who dipped in and out of causes for publicity, Redford made activism a permanent part of his identity. Even in his later years, when he could have chosen quiet retirement, he continued lending his voice to documentaries, campaigns, and global summits. When he spoke about climate change or democracy, it carried weight. Not just because he was a Hollywood icon, but because people knew he meant every word. Robert Redford was a fighter. On screen, he battled villains, corruption, and injustice. Off screen, he fought for the earth, for freedom, and for the belief that one voice, when used with courage, could spark change. Personal tragedies and hidden pain. For all the glamour, the awards, and the applause, Robert Redford's life was also marked by profound sorrow. Behind the famous smile and the calm charisma, there were wounds that never fully healed. Private tragedies that shaped the man as much as any role or film ever did. His first heartbreak came early. In 1958, at the age of 22, Redford married historian Pas Lola van Wagenen. They were young, in love, and starting a family. But just a year later, tragedy struck. Their first child, Scott, died suddenly of sudden infant death syndrome at only 10 weeks old. Redford rarely spoke about it in public, but close friends later said the pain of losing a child never left him. For a man who seemed to have it all, that loss was a reminder that fame could not protect anyone from grief. The couple went on to have 3 more children: Shauna, David James, known as Jamie, and Amy. For years, Redford tried to balance fatherhood with the demands of Hollywood, but his family life was far from easy. His marriage to Lola ended in 1985 after nearly 3 decades together. Unlike many celebrity divorces, it was not filled with tabloid drama. Instead, it was a quiet acknowledgement that the bond had frayed under the pressures of career and distance. Still, Redford found love again. In 2009, he married Tadke Seibel Sagers, a German artist he had been with for over a decade. Their partnership was grounded in art and nature, 2 passions they deeply shared. But even in this new chapter, Redford was carrying the weight of old wounds. Perhaps the most devastating blow came in 2020. When his son, James Jamie Redford, died at 58 after a long battle with bile duct cancer. Jamie, like his father, had become a filmmaker and activist, co-founding the Redford Center, and dedicating his career to telling stories about health, environment, and hope. His passing shattered the family. Redford's representative released a statement at the time saying he was minonord, mourning with his family and deeply grieving the loss of a beloved son. But in public, Redford remained stoic, keeping his pain private. Those close to him said he was heartbroken, a father forced to endure the unthinkable twice, outliving not 1 but 2 of his children. These tragedies never defined him completely, but they left shadows. They gave his performances a quiet depth, a sense of sadness behind the eyes that audiences could feel, even when they did not know why. They also fueled his determination to make a difference. Losing Scott made him more protective of his family. Losing Jamie strengthened his resolve to keep fighting for the causes his son believed in. In later interviews, when asked about legacy, Redford often brushed the question aside. He did not want to be remembered as just a star or a director. What mattered, he hinted, was whether he left things better for the next generation. Perhaps that was the voice of a man who knew the fragility of life, who had loved and lost, and who carried scars invisible to the world. Behind the charm of the Sundance Kid, behind the glamour of the Oscars, Robert Redford lived with grief most of us never saw. His tragedies did not break him, but they made him more human, and in that, perhaps lay the secret of why audiences connected to him so deeply. Controversies and scandals. For decades, Robert Redford carried himself with dignity. Unlike many of his Hollywood peers, his name was rarely splashed across tabloids for reckless behavior or messy feuds. But that did not mean his life was free from controversy. Even legends attract storms, and Redford had his share of headlines that stirred gossip, debates, and whispers. One of the strangest moments came on New Year's Eve, 2015. Out of nowhere, a rumor swept across Twitter. Robert Redford had died. The so-called news came from a fake Sky News account, claiming he had fallen from a golf cart and suffered fatal injuries. Within minutes, the hashtag RIP Robert Redford was trending. Fans panicked, celebrities began posting tributes, and media outlets scrambled to confirm the story. It took less than an hour for Redford's publicist to shut it down, calling it a sick hoax. She assured everyone, Robert Redford is alive and well. But the damage was done. For the first time, Redford tasted what it was like to watch his own obituary play out in real time. Thousands of shocked fans had written heartfelt goodbyes, only to realize they had been tricked. Redford himself never commented publicly, But the incident highlighted the darker side of celebrity gossip, how one false tweet could shake the entire world. 3 years later, in 2018, Redford created another media storm, this time unintentionally. While promoting what would be his final starring role in The Old Man and the Gun, he casually announced that he was retiring from acting. "I have been doing it since I was 21. I thought, well, that's enough." The announcement made global headlines. Redford retires. Fans mourned, critics celebrated his career, and Hollywood prepared to say goodbye. But weeks later, Redford backtracked. In a new interview, he admitted he regretted making the retirement statement because it distracted from the film itself. He added coyly, "Never say never." Suddenly, headlines flipped. Redford retires from retirement. Some called it a publicity stunt, while others believed it showed he was conflicted about letting go. For gossip columns, it was pure gold. Politics also drew him into controversy. Redford was a proud liberal and never hid his views. He clashed with conservative politicians, particularly during Donald Trump's presidency. In one essay, he bluntly suggested Trump should resign, declaring, "Politics is in a very dark place right now." Fans applauded his honesty, but critics called him another Hollywood elite lecturing America. Right-wing media branded him out of touch, while supporters praised his courage to speak out even in his 80s. And then there was the matter of Sundance itself. What began as a grassroots festival soon exploded into a global phenomenon, attracting celebrities, luxury brands, and corporate buyers. By the 2000s, critics accused Sundance of selling out, turning into a Hollywood marketplace instead of a safe space for struggling filmmakers. Redford often defended it, insisting the core mission had not changed. Still, the whispers persisted. Had the godfather of indie film created a machine that became too big for its own good? Even in later years, small controversies followed him. In 2021, he filed a lawsuit against a New York gallery over a financial dispute involving artwork. It was settled quietly, but for a man known for avoiding scandal, even minor legal battles drew attention. Robert Redford never lived the kind of scandal-filled life that tabloids usually crave. There were no drunken arrests, no explosive divorces, no shocking affairs. His controversies were quieter, more dignified, yet they still fueled headlines. A fake death hoax, a confusing retirement, political battles, criticism over Sundance. And maybe that was the real intrigue. Redford managed to stay a gentleman in a town that thrives on chaos. His controversies never destroyed him. They only reminded the world that even legends live under the relentless gaze of gossip. Hollywood reactions and farewell. When news of Robert Redford's death broke, the reaction from Hollywood was immediate and deeply emotional. It was not just the passing of an actor, it felt like the closing of a chapter in film history. Jane Fonda, his longtime co-star and close friend, was among the first to speak out. She admitted she could not stop crying when she heard the news. Fonda and Redford had shared the screen in films like Barefoot in the Park and The Electric Horseman, and their chemistry was undeniable. "He was a beautiful person in every way," she said, adding that Redford stood for an America we have to keep fighting for. Meryl Streep, who shared the screen with him in the sweeping romance Out of Africa, called him simply one of the lions. Her words carried a quiet dignity reflecting the way Redford's presence had always commanded respect. Other stars from across generations poured in their tributes. Ron Howard even praised him as a cultural game changer, noting that Redford's decision to launch Sundance had reshaped cinema forever. Marlee Matlin wrote that her Oscar-winning film, Coda, found an audience only because Sundance existed, calling Redford a genius who gave voices to those who might never have been heard. Leonardo DiCaprio, who had admired Redford's activism, hailed him for his unwavering mighty commitment to protecting our planet. Mark Ruffalo, admitted with regret that he had written a letter thanking Redford for inspiring him, but never sent it before Redford passed. The heartbreak in his words echoed the grief of many who felt they owed their careers to him. Even outside Hollywood, tributes poured in. Hillary Clinton praised him as a true American icon, not only for his legendary acting, but for his lifelong fight for progressive causes and new filmmakers. And in a rare moment of unity, Donald Trump, often a target of Redford's criticism, also acknowledged his greatness. Robert Redford was great. There was a period of time when he was the hottest star in Hollywood. He made 7 or 8 great movies, Trump remarked. It was an unlikely compliment that showed just how wide Redford's impact stretched. Social media turned into a digital memorial. The hashtag #ThankYouBob trended worldwide as fans posted their favorite Redford movie moments. Clips of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting circulated everywhere, while stills of his craggy smile reminded the world why he was once called the most handsome man alive. Younger fans who had never seen his classics on the big screen shared how his activism and Sundance legacy inspired them. Film institutions also honored him. The Sundance Institute issued a moving statement. Robert Redford, our ultimate champion of independent film, launched a movement that inspired generations of artists. His generosity, clarity of purpose, and rebellious spirit will continue to guide us. Turner Classic Movies announced a marathon of his greatest films, while the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences confirmed that the next Oscars would dedicate a segment to his memory. The tributes revealed something rare. Redford was not remembered for scandal or spectacle. He was remembered for integrity, artistry, and purpose. Colleagues described him as generous, humble, and deeply protective of the craft. Fans remembered him as a face of their youth, a man whose films shaped their imagination. When a legend dies, the world often scrambles to decide what part of them to hold on to. With Robert Redford, the answer was clear. He would be remembered not only as the Sundance Kid, or the Oscar-winning director, but as the man who gave cinema its independent spirit, and lived with a quiet dignity in an industry that often forgets what that means. Reflection and final tribute. Robert Redford's story was never just about the movies. It was about the way he carried himself. As an artist, an activist, and a human being who lived through triumphs and heartbreaks with remarkable grace. His death on September 16th, 2025, may have closed the final chapter of his life, but his legacy continues to breathe through every frame he left behind. He was the Sundance Kid, the outlaw with a smile so charming it became timeless. He was the con man in The Sting, the reporter in All the President's Men, the lover in The Way We Were. On screen, he could be anyone, a rebel, a hero, a dreamer. Off screen, he became a mentor, a protector of independent voices, and a fighter for the earth. Unlike many stars of his generation, Redford refused to let Hollywood define him. He stepped away from the spotlight at the height of his fame to direct Ordinary People, a film that won him an Oscar and forever proved he was more than a handsome face. He built the Sundance Institute, which gave countless filmmakers their first shot. And he turned his fortune and fame into tools for change, fighting for clean air, clean water, and justice when it was easier to stay silent. But perhaps what made Robert Redford so unforgettable was not just his achievements. It was the humanity behind them. He knew tragedy. He buried a baby son. He grieved the death of another decades later. He endured the heartbreaks that most would never see behind the movie posters and magazine covers. And yet, he never let grief harden him. Instead, it deepened him. When fans watched his performances, they sensed it. The sadness behind the eyes, the weight in his smile. That quiet authenticity was why his characters felt real. It was why audiences believed him. Because Robert Redford was not just acting. He was living, carrying all the joys and sorrows of his own story. Now, as tributes pour in and the industry mourns, one thing is certain: his influence is forever.